The city never truly slept. Even late at night, lights from tall buildings stayed on, and cars kept moving like silent rivers. In one of the tallest office towers stood a man who had everything people dreamed of: money, power, respect, and control over a large business empire. Yet when the night grew quiet, his life felt empty. He often stayed in his office long after everyone had gone home, staring at files without really reading them. Listening to the hum of the city below, he trusted very few people. Success had taught him that smiles could hide greed, and kindness could be fake. Meetings filled his days, but nights reminded him of how alone he truly was. His office was cleaned every night by different workers sent by an agency. He rarely noticed them. To him, they were just shadows passing through his space, leaving behind a clean floor and empty trash bins. One evening, something changed without him realizing it at first. That night, the cleaning agency sent a new girl. She arrived quietly, wearing simple clothes that showed signs of long use. Her shoes were worn, her hands rough from work, but her eyes carried a calm strength. Life had not been kind to her. She came from a poor area where every day was a struggle. She had lost her parents early and lived with relatives who barely tolerated her presence. Cleaning jobs were not a choice for her. They were survival. She entered the building with her cleaning cart, nervous but focused. It was her first night assigned to such a grand office. The building alone made her feel small. The floors shined, the walls were spotless, and everything smelled of power and money. She reminded herself to stay quiet, do her work well, and leave without trouble. Losing this job was not an option. When she stepped into the main office floor, she noticed the lights were still on inside one large office. The man was there, sitting behind a big desk, sleeves rolled up, eyes fixed on a screen. She paused for a moment, unsure if she should come back later. Many people disliked cleaners working while they were still present, but he did not look up. So she slowly began her work. She cleaned carefully, moving softly so as not to disturb him. Every small sound felt loud in the silent room. As she wiped the glass table, she noticed how messy the desk was. Papers were scattered everywhere, coffee cups left untouched, and stress hung in the air. It was clear this man carried heavy thoughts. After some time, he finally looked up. His eyes met hers for a brief moment. He expected the usual sight of a tired worker rushing through the job. Instead, he saw someone fully focused, working with care as if the place mattered to her. There was no fear in her face, only respect. He went back to his work, but something about her presence felt different. The room felt less empty. She finished cleaning that section and moved toward the shelves. As she did, one file slipped from a stack and fell to the floor. Papers spread everywhere. Her heart raced. She quickly knelt down, picking them up, worried she might be scolded or even fired before she could finish. He stood up and walked toward her. "I'm sorry," she said softly, not looking up. "I didn't mean to." He looked at the papers and then at her shaking hands. Instead of anger, he felt something unexpected. Understanding. "It's fine," he said calmly. Those files were already a mess. She looked up, surprised by his tone. People like him usually spoke with cold authority, but his voice carried no harshness. She nodded and handed him the papers neatly arranged. "Thank you," said. That single word stayed with her. She continued cleaning, more relaxed now. As she moved across the office, he watched quietly. She did not rush. She cleaned as if she took pride in her work, even though no one praised her for it. When she finished, she checked every corner twice, making sure nothing was missed. Before leaving, she stopped near the door, hesitated, then spoke. "I'll be here again tomorrow night," she said politely. "If there's anything you don't want touched, please tell me." He was surprised again. No cleaner had ever asked him that. "That won't be necessary," he replied. "You're doing fine." She gave a small nod and left. After she was gone, the office felt strangely quiet again. He leaned back in his chair and stared at the clean floor. For the first time in a long while, his thoughts were not entirely heavy. He told himself it was nothing, just another worker, just another night. But when the clock struck late hours, He realized he had been thinking about her calm eyes more than his work. Meanwhile, she walked out of the building into the cool night air. Her body ached, but her heart felt lighter. She had expected a long night filled with stress, but instead she felt respected. That mattered more to her than money. She took the bus home, holding on to the small relief that this job might last. Neither of them knew it yet. But that quiet night had already planted something new in both their lives. Fate had started its work in silence, without warning, in a place where love was never expected to grow. The next night, the girl returned to the office with a quiet determination. She knew the work would be hard, but she also knew that each night she spent there, she was learning more than just cleaning. Life had taught her that small opportunities could sometimes become something much bigger. She pushed the cart through the doors, took a deep breath, and began her routine. The office looked exactly the same as the night before, except now it held a sense of familiarity for her. She moved carefully, organizing papers, wiping dust, and polishing surfaces. She noticed small things she had missed the night before, the way the light reflected off the glass, the faint hum of the air conditioner, and the quiet rhythm of the city below. She worked silently, but inside, her mind wandered to her own life. The thought of her struggling family waiting at home reminded her why she was here. Every coin she earned mattered. The billionaire arrived later than usual that night. He had meetings that had dragged on far longer than he expected. And by the time he entered his office, the girl was already at work. He paused at the doorway, watching her move gracefully between desks. There was something calming about the way she worked, focused and respectful, without rushing or complaining. Her presence brought a strange peace to the room. He went to his desk and tried to focus on work, but he found himself glancing at her often. She noticed his eyes, but didn't look up. She simply continued her work. There was no pretension, no attempt to impress, just honesty in her actions. He found it unsettling in a way he couldn't understand. He was used to people trying to gain favor, but she gave nothing and expected nothing. It was refreshing as she cleaned. Small conversations began. She would occasionally ask a question about a file or the office setup, and he would answer without much thought. Simple exchanges, yet they started to build a connection. He learned that she came from a very difficult background, and her life outside this office was filled with hardships. He realized that, despite her circumstances, she carried herself with a quiet dignity. The girl, on the other hand, began to notice things about him she had not expected. Beneath his serious demeanor, she saw hints of loneliness and vulnerability. He did not have family around him, and though he had money, she sensed a deep emptiness. She felt a strange empathy for him, though she would never say it out loud. She was here to work, not to befriend. But her heart noticed what her mind could not ignore. One night a sudden problem arose in the office. A stack of important files had fallen, spilling papers across the floor. She immediately knelt down and began gathering them. Her hands shook slightly, but she did not panic. The billionaire watched her carefully. He had seen many employees panic in minor situations, but she handled it with grace and focus. When she finished, she handed him the files neatly stacked. "Thank you," he said quietly. But this time there was a warmth in his tone that had not been there before. She nodded and returned to her work, a small smile forming on her face. She did not need recognition. But hearing gratitude felt good after all the struggles she had faced. As the days passed, her small talks became a routine. She would mention simple things like, "The floor near the window is dusty," or "The coffee machine needs cleaning," and he would respond. Sometimes with a hint of amusement at her attention to detail. Gradually, he started sharing small pieces of his life as well. He spoke about his work challenges, his late-night thoughts, and his feelings of being alone despite being surrounded by people. One evening, he asked her a question that surprised her. "Why do you work so hard?" he asked. "You could be somewhere else, earning more, living easier." She looked at him and took a deep breath. "I have no choice," she said softly. "I have a family that depends on me and dreams I cannot afford to ignore. Every night I work here, it is for them and for a future I hope to have." He was silent for a long moment, absorbing her words. There was a strength in her that he admired, a resilience that he had rarely seen. Most people in his world were motivated by money, power, or status. She worked for love, for family, and for survival. It was a completely different world, yet it fascinated him, for her part. She began to see him not just as a wealthy man, but as someone who carried heavy burdens. She noticed the sleepless nights, the stress on his face, and the isolation that money could not fix. She felt a mix of empathy and curiosity, wanting to understand the person behind the title of billionaire. Their connection grew quietly, without dramatic gestures or grand declarations. It was in the way she moved with care, the way he listened when she spoke, and the way they shared moments of understanding without needing to fill the silence with meaningless words. Nights passed, and slowly an unspoken bond formed between them. One night, after a particularly long day, he found her sitting on a chair in the corner, taking a short break. She looked tired, but there was a calm in her eyes that made him pause. He walked over and asked, "Do you want some water?" She shook her head politely. "No, thank you. I will be fine," he nodded, and sat across from her, a rare moment of stillness between them. They did not speak much, but the presence of each other was comforting. It was strange how a simple routine of cleaning and working late nights had brought to people from completely different worlds. Together, as the weeks passed, he began to notice little things: how she organized her cleaning, how she remembered details about his office, and how she treated everyone with respect. He started leaving small notes for her, simple messages of thanks or reminders about certain tasks. She would find them the next night and respond with a polite note of acknowledgement. It became a silent conversation, a way to connect without disturbing their work. She, in turn, noticed changes in him. He was less tense, more willing to listen, and more patient. The office felt lighter when she was there. She realized that her presence, small as it might seem, was having an impact on someone who had everything but happiness. It gave her a quiet satisfaction, a sense of purpose beyond earning money. Through these nightly interactions, they began to learn from each other. He learned humility, empathy, and the value of genuine connection. She learned confidence, patience, and the subtle power of kindness. Both began to change, slowly and naturally, without realizing how significant their influence on each other was. By the end of part 2, the connection between them had grown deeper. It was still silent and unspoken, but the foundation of trust, respect, and understanding had been laid. They were no longer just billionaire and cleaner. They were two human beings, quietly sharing the same space, each leaving a mark on the other's life. The nights that once felt empty and lonely now held warmth, hope, and the faint beginnings of something neither of them expected: an emotional bond that could change the course of their lives forever. One night, as the girl was finishing her work, she noticed an unusual tension in the office. Papers were scattered on the floor, files were misplaced, and there was an air of worry that she had never seen before. Something had gone wrong. The billionaire, usually composed and controlled, was pacing around, his brows furrowed, and his hands rubbing over his face. He looked tired, frustrated, and more vulnerable than ever. The girl hesitated for a moment. She had never seen him like this. She knew she was just a cleaner, but something inside her told her she could not simply ignore the situation. Carefully, she walked over and asked softly, "Is there anything I can do to help?" He looked at her, surprised that she even asked. Most people in his world would have run away or waited for someone with more authority to intervene. There was something honest and genuine in her offer. He shook his head briefly, then sighed. "I don't think there's much anyone can do right now," he said. Though his voice was softer than usual, the girl didn't leave. Instead, she observed quietly, noticing small details he might have missed in his rush to solve the problem. She picked up a few files, arranged them neatly, and began to clear some of the chaos. She did not speak much, but her careful actions helped the room feel less overwhelming. The billionaire watched her, amazed at her calm under pressure. In moments like this, he realized her value went far beyond the simple work she was hired to do. After a few hours of quiet effort, the situation started to stabilize. The files were organized, and some of the urgent tasks were addressed. The billionaire finally leaned back in his chair, exhaustion visible on his face. He looked at the girl who was still standing nearby, hands slightly dirty, but eyes clear and focused. For a moment, the silence was powerful. Words seemed unnecessary. "I don't know how to thank you," he said quietly. "Most people would have run away, but you stayed and helped." She shook her head, still humble. "I did what I could," she replied softly. "I just wanted to help." He realized then that her courage, honesty, and willingness to step up had touched something deep inside him. He had seen many people work for him. Many people claim loyalty or pretend to care. But she had acted without any thought of reward or recognition. That was rare. That was real. Over the next few weeks, their bond deepened even more. The girl continued her cleaning, and their small conversations became more meaningful. She shared pieces of her life, her struggles to support her family, and her dreams for the future. He listened, truly listened, without judgment or condescension. He began to respect her resilience and the dignity with which she carried herself despite hardships. One night, a minor accident occurred in the office. A stack of heavy files fell, and one of the papers tore. She immediately rushed to him, apologizing, though it was not her fault. He looked at her, shaking his head with a small smile. "It's fine," he said. "Really, it's nothing. Accidents happen." Even in such small moments, their connection grew. She realized that he was not just a man of wealth and power, but a person capable of understanding and compassion. He realized that she was not just a cleaner, but someone with intelligence, insight, and a heart capable of kindness that could not be bought. They started sharing subtle acts of care. He would leave a cup of water or a snack for her when she worked late nights. She would make sure his office was organized and comfortable, noticing little details that made a difference. Their unspoken understanding created a rhythm, a silent harmony that made the office feel warmer. Even during the coldest nights. One evening, after an unusually long day, he found her resting in a corner of the office, exhausted. He hesitated, then sat down across from her. Neither spoke for a long while. The silence was not awkward. It was comforting. Finally, he asked, "Do you ever dream of something bigger for yourself?" She looked at him and nodded. "Yes," she said softly. "I dream of a life where I don't have to struggle every day, where my family is safe, and I can follow my own dreams too." He considered her words carefully. He had spent his life accumulating wealth and power. But her words made him reflect on his own loneliness and the emptiness that money could not fill. He realized that true fulfillment came not from possessions, but from connection, from understanding, and from genuine care for others. The girl, for her part, noticed a change in him too. He was no longer just a distant, busy figure in an office. He was someone who shared pieces of himself, someone who trusted her with small secrets and feelings. Their bond, built through small acts and quiet conversations, stronger than either expected. A few nights later, a crisis hit the company. A major deal was at risk, and the billionaire was under immense pressure. The girl witnessed the stress, the anxiety, and the weight on his shoulders. She could see how much responsibility he carried, how his decisions affected countless lives. Yet, she also saw the person behind the business, the one who cared deeply but could not always show it. Without hesitation, she acted. She offered insights, helped organize documents, and even suggested solutions that he had not considered in his stress. Her calm reasoning and clear thinking helped him see the situation more clearly. It was a turning point. He realized that she was not just a cleaner. She was someone with intelligence, judgment, and courage. When the crisis passed, he looked at her with admiration. "You have done more than anyone could have expected," he said. "You saved a lot tonight." She shook her head, a soft smile on her face. "I only did what I could," she replied. "I wanted to help." That night, he understood something important. Respect and trust were not given because of wealth or status. They were earned through actions, courage, and honesty. And she had earned it in the most genuine way possible. From that night onward, her connection became stronger and more personal. Small gestures, shared conversations, and mutual understanding created a bridge between their worlds. She began to see him as more than a billionaire. She saw a human being capable of loneliness, dreams, and emotions. He began to see her as more than a cleaner. He saw strength, resilience, and a heart full of compassion. In the quiet hours of the night, as the city slept, they discovered something rare. A silent bond that did not need words, that did not depend on status or wealth. It was built on trust, understanding, and respect. It was the beginning of a story neither of them expected, but both would come to cherish. By the end of part 3, the quiet connection between them had turned into a deep sense of reliance. He depended on her honesty and insight in ways he never admitted. She depended on his trust and recognition, a validation she had rarely experienced. Both were changed, both were learning, both were moving closer to a connection that could one day grow into something beyond friendship. Something profound, born from empathy and courage. Weeks turned into months, and their routine continued, quietly deepening into something more meaningful. The billionaire found himself looking forward to the nights she would work. Not because she cleaned the office, but because of the small moments of connection. The calm she brought, and the rare sense of understanding he could not find elsewhere. She, on the other hand, began noticing subtle changes in herself. She felt more confident, more seen, and strangely happier despite her hard life outside the office walls. But life rarely stays simple. One evening, a conversation arose that would test the limits of their growing bond. The billionaire, looking tired after a particularly long day, leaned back in his chair and spoke quietly. "I have to ask you something," he began, not meeting her eyes. "Do you ever think about the differences between us?" She paused, hesitant to answer. It was true that their worlds were completely different. She came from struggle, from a life where every day was a fight for survival. He had wealth, power, and privileges she had never dreamed of. Yet over time, she had come to see the person behind the billionaire. She respected him for the human he was, not the status he carried. "Yes," she said softly. "I think about it sometimes. I wonder if people like us, if people from different worlds, can ever truly understand each other." He remained silent, and the weight of the moment filled the room. Outside, the city lights blinked quietly, unaware of the tension in this office. They had spent months together, yet the gap between their lives had always loomed in the background. Now, it had to be faced. "Sometimes," he admitted finally, "I feel like we're worlds apart. I worry about what people would think if they knew how close we've become." She nodded, understanding. "I worry too," she said. "I don't want to cause trouble for you. You have your life, your reputation. I'm just here doing my job." The honesty in her voice struck him deeply. She wasn't seeking attention or favor. She wasn't asking for more than the truth of the moment. She simply spoke from her heart. And that made him realize how rare and pure her feelings were. For the next few nights, there was a subtle tension between them. Their interactions were polite but cautious. He worried about crossing boundaries, about what society might say. She tried to focus on her work, fearing that her emotions might complicate the delicate balance they had found. Both were aware of the growing connection, but were unsure how to handle it. Then, one evening, a minor incident changed everything. A competitor had tried to manipulate a deal that the billionaire was handling. Documents were missing, and the pressure was immense. He became visibly stressed, pacing and muttering to himself. The girl watched quietly for a while, then decided to speak. "I think I can help," she said. Her voice was steady, but inside her heart raced. "If you let me, I can help organize the files and figure out what's missing." He looked at her, torn between pride and gratitude. "You don't have to do that," he said, but she shook her head firmly. "I want to," she said. "Please." Reluctantly, he allowed her to help. She worked carefully, noticing details others might have missed, spotting inconsistencies in the documents and piecing together what had gone wrong. Her sharp eyes and quick thinking made a tangible difference. He realized once again that she was more than her job, that she possessed intelligence, insight, and courage he had never expected from someone in her position. When the crisis was finally resolved, he looked at her with a mixture of awe and gratitude. "I don't know what I would have done without you," he said quietly. "You're incredible." She blushed slightly but kept her composure. "I just did what I could," she replied. "That's all anyone can do." It was in that moment that the walls between them began to crumble. He began to see her not as a cleaner or someone beneath him, but as an equal in spirit. Her honesty, her courage, and her selflessness made him question the barriers that wealth and status had built around his heart. For the first time in a long time, he felt seen and understood in a way that money and power could never provide. Meanwhile, she realized that her feelings for him were more than admiration or respect. She cared about him deeply, in a way that was frightening yet beautiful. She knew the reality of their situation, the social gap, the judgments, and the differences in their lives, but she couldn't ignore the bond that had grown between them, despite the unspoken feelings. They continued their routine. Nights became a space where they could be themselves, free from the expectations of the world outside. He shared his thoughts, fears, and dreams, and she listened, offering quiet support and insight. She shared her life, her struggles, and her hopes, and he offered encouragement and respect. Their connection was deeper than friendship, yet they both held back, fearing the implications of their emotions. One evening, he asked her a question that made her pause. "Do you ever imagine a life beyond this work, beyond this building?" She looked down, thinking of her family, her struggles, and her dreams. "I do," she said softly. "I dream of stability, of being able to live without fear. I dream of happiness for myself and my family." He studied her face, seeing the strength behind her eyes, and he realized that she deserved more than the life she had. He wanted to give her the world she had never known. But he also understood the delicate balance between generosity and intrusion. It was not easy, but he was determined to find a way to show her that she mattered. The subtle tension, the quiet understanding, and the unspoken feelings made their relationship complex yet beautiful. They both knew that the outside world might never understand. But within the walls of the office, they had found a rare connection. It was a bond built on trust, respect, and admiration, slowly turning into something deeper. By the end of part 4, they were both aware that their lives had been irrevocably changed. The girl's courage and honesty had shown him the value of true connection, and he had shown her that respect and care could exist beyond wealth and status. Love was beginning to grow, quietly and cautiously, nurtured by shared experiences, mutual understanding, and the undeniable truth that their hearts had found something special in each other. The nights that once felt routine now carried anticipation, warmth, and the promise of something more, as fate continued to guide them toward a future neither of them had imagined. The nights continued, each one filled with quiet moments and shared understanding. Yet both of them knew that their bond was no longer just about work or friendship. It had grown into something deeper, a connection neither could ignore. The billionaire found himself thinking about her during the day, wondering how she was, hoping she was safe, and realizing how much he valued her presence. The girl felt the same, her thoughts often drifting to the office, to the man who had become more than an employer to her. One night, after the office was quiet and the city lights shimmered through the windows, he asked her to sit down with him. Her heart raced as she obeyed, unsure of what he was going to say. He took a deep breath and looked at her with sincerity that she had rarely seen in anyone. "I need to be honest with you," he began. "These months, they've changed me. Your presence, your honesty, your courage, they mean more to me than I can express." She looked at him, her eyes wide but calm. "I feel the same," she admitted softly. "I never expected to feel this way, but I do." He reached out and held her hand gently. The gesture was simple, yet it carried the weight of emotions they had both held back for so long. "I know our worlds are different," he said, "and I know there are challenges. But I cannot ignore what I feel anymore. I care for you deeply." Her heart beat faster, but she did not pull away. "I care for you too," she said. "Even though it's complicated, even though life hasn't been easy for either of us." They sat in silence for a moment, holding hands, feeling the warmth and connection that had grown over months of shared nights. It was a quiet affirmation that they were no longer just two people from different worlds. They were two hearts that had found each other in the most unexpected place, the billionaire. knew the road ahead would not be simple. There would be challenges, judgment from society, and the constant scrutiny that came with his position. But he also knew that love like this was rare, and he was willing to face anything to protect it. He began to imagine a life where they could be together, not as employer and employee, but as equals, partners in life. The girl, too, faced her own fears. She worried about the differences in their lives, the expectations of the world, and how her family would react. Yet she could not deny the joy and hope she felt in his presence. She realized that this was an opportunity to step into a life she had dreamed of but never thought possible. With courage and trust, she allowed herself to believe in a future where love could transcend barriers. Over the following weeks, they continued their nights in the office, but now there was a new energy between them. They talked about their dreams, their fears, and their plans for the future. Each conversation strengthened their bond, making them more certain of the connection they shared. They celebrated small victories together, comforted each other during tough moments, and quietly built a foundation for a life beyond the office walls. One evening, the billionaire surprised her by leaving a small note on her cleaning cart. It read, "You are not just a part of my night, you are a part of my life. Thank you for being you." She read it quietly, feeling tears well up in her eyes. She responded with a simple note of her own, "And you have shown me that life can be more than struggle. Thank you for seeing me." The small exchange of notes became a tradition, a private way to communicate their feelings when words were not enough. It was a reminder that love was not always loud and dramatic. It could be gentle, it was quiet, and profound. Eventually, the billionaire decided to take a bold step. He invited her to a small dinner outside of the office, a simple but meaningful gesture. She hesitated, nervous about stepping into his world, but she also felt a thrill of excitement. That night they shared stories, laughter, and moments of vulnerability. It was a chance for them to see each other not just in the context of work, but as individuals with hopes, fears, and dreams. As the months passed, their love grew stronger, tested by small challenges and strengthened by trust and honesty. They faced moments of doubt, external judgment, and internal fears, but each time they chose each other. Their connection was no longer a secret of the office. It had become a force that shaped their lives and gave them hope for the future. Finally, one quiet night, he took her hand and spoke with unwavering determination. "I want you in my life fully and completely, not as an employee, but as my partner. Will you allow me to make that promise?" Her eyes filled with tears, but her smile was radiant. "Yes," she whispered. "I trust you, and I want that too." The billionaire held her close, feeling a sense of completeness he had never known before. It was a love born not from wealth or status, but from understanding, respect, courage, and the simple truth of their hearts. In the end, what began as a simple cleaning job had become a story of love, resilience, and fate. The girl who had walked into the office with nothing but determination and honesty had changed the life of a billionaire. And in return, he had shown her a world where love, respect, and kindness were possible. Together, they stepped into a future where their hearts, not their circumstances, defined their story, proving that fate has a way of bringing the right people together at the right time. No matter the odds, the story of their nights together had taken a new shape. After months of quiet connection, shared struggles, and growing understanding, they finally allowed themselves to imagine a future together. But real life was never as simple as dreams, and their journey was about to be tested by challenges they could not ignore. The billionaire knew that his decision to openly care for the girl would be met with scrutiny. His family, colleagues, even friends would question why someone of his status would choose to love someone from a completely different background. Yet he no longer hesitated. He had experienced loneliness, and he had felt the emptiness of wealth without connection. He understood that this relationship was real, grounded in honesty, courage, and mutual respect. For the girl, accepting his love was both thrilling and frightening. She had never imagined a life beyond her struggles. The idea of love, comfort, and security had seemed distant, almost impossible. Yet now that it was here, she wanted to embrace it fully, despite the fear of judgment and societal pressure. She knew she could never have imagined this life alone. She needed trust, and she had chosen to place that trust in him. One evening, the billionaire invited her to a quiet dinner in a place away from the office and away from prying eyes. It was simple, yet thoughtfully arranged, a space where they could speak freely and share their hopes. They talked about everything: their childhoods, their struggles, their dreams, and the life they wanted to build together. The conversation was honest, open, and deep, and it strengthened their bond further. Over dinner, the billionaire expressed his intentions. He wanted her to know that his feelings were serious and that he was committed to building a life where they could be equals. Partners who faced challenges together. She listened with care, realizing that this was not just a fleeting emotion or an infatuation. It was love in its purest, most sincere form. She felt a mix of excitement and vulnerability, understanding that trust and courage would be the pillars of their future. The weeks that followed were filled with both joy and challenges. They had to navigate the complexities of a world that would question their relationship. Gossip, assumptions, and even doubts tested their patience and understanding. But they faced it together, learning to rely on each other in ways they had never anticipated. Each challenge they overcame reinforced the strength of their bond and the sincerity of their love. Their connection continued to grow through small gestures and shared moments. He would leave notes of encouragement for her, reminding her of her worth, her courage, and the impact she had on his life. She would respond in kind, sharing her thoughts and feelings with honesty and vulnerability. These exchanges became a lifeline, a way to communicate emotions that words sometimes failed to express. One night, as they walked through the quiet streets after an evening together, he spoke about the future. "I want us to have a life where our pasts do not define us," he said. "Where we can create something meaningful, built on trust, respect, and love." She looked at him, her heart swelling with emotion. "I want that too," she replied. "I want a life where we support each other, where we are equals in every sense." Their journey was not without fear and uncertainty, but it was guided by a deep understanding of each other's hearts. They had seen each other at their best and worst, and they had chosen to stay, to support, and to trust. That choice, more than anything, had transformed their lives as their love grew. The billionaire began to take steps to integrate her into his world, carefully and respectfully. He introduced her to a few trusted friends and colleagues, preparing them for the person she was and the strength she carried. She, in turn, met people from his world cautiously, carrying her dignity and confidence with her, never compromising who she was. Slowly, the walls that once separated them from the world outside began to fade. Their relationship became a source of inspiration for those who witnessed it, not because of wealth or status, but because of the authenticity, courage, and trust that had built it. It was a story of love that defied expectations, yet remained grounded in reality and mutual respect. Through all this, the girl never forgot her roots. She continued to support her family, using the opportunities she had been given to improve their lives. The billionaire encouraged her to pursue her dreams, offering guidance and support without control or dominance. Together, they learned that love was not about possession or status. It was about support, growth, and shared vision. One quiet night, after months of navigating challenges and celebrating victories, they sat together in the office where it all began. The lights of the city shimmered through the windows, and the hum of the building was familiar and comforting. He turned to her and said, "Do you remember the first night you came here?" She smiled softly, remembering the nervousness, the humility, and the determination that had brought her to that office. "I never imagined it would lead to this," she said. "Neither did I," he admitted, "but I am grateful every day that it did. You have changed my life in ways I could never have imagined. I love you, and I want to build a life where we face everything together as equals and partners." Odd. Her eyes filled with tears, not of sadness, but of joy. "I love you too," she said, "and I am ready to face the world with you." In that moment, the office no longer felt like a place of work or loneliness. It had become the foundation of a love story that defied odds, a symbol of courage, honesty, and destiny. The nights that once carried routine and silence were now filled with hope, trust, and the promise of a shared future. their journey continued. Not without obstacles, but with resilience, faith, and a deep understanding of each other's hearts. What began as a simple job, a routine task of cleaning an office, had become a transformative experience for both. Fate had brought them together, but love, trust, and courage had allowed them to stay together, building a life where their hearts, not their circumstances, defined their story. In the end, the billionaire and the girl proved that love could cross boundaries, defy expectations, and create something beautiful and enduring. They had discovered that true connection, respect, and shared dreams were the most valuable treasures in life, more precious than wealth, more powerful than status, and infinitely more meaningful than anything else the world could offer.